From the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., Call on Congress. The program discussing national issues that affect Oklahoma. Your host, U.S. Representative Tom Cole.
Thank you for joining me today for another episode of Cole on Congress. Today I'm pleased to welcome Congressman Kevin Brady as our special guest. Kevin represents the 8th District of the great state of Texas, the southeastern part of the state. He's a senior member of the House Ways and Means Committee and serves as vice chairman of the Joint Economic Committee and is a deputy whip for the GOP leadership team. Kevin, great to have you here.
Tom, thanks for having me.
It really, really is. And I always try and start these things personal, and I've always admired you because you're just one of these guys that gets stuff done, and you're kind of a member around. It's amazing the number of tough tasks that find their way to you. And we got one of those not too long ago. Our mutual friend Pete Sessions decided we would head up the Republican dues drive for the NRCC. That's our campaign committee, and that makes you real popular because you're going to talk to members about why they need to write from their campaign to our campaign committee, $50,000 checks, $100,000 checks, whatever it is. And so we got this routine going. We were called the Dues Brothers, which you can imagine how we looked the part. And but Kevin was masterful. He opened up. You're trying to get these guys in a good mood. We have a big conference, and he's on his own dreamed up this deal. He's not there that day, but he had a special video message, as it turned out, from beyond the veil, because he's dressed as Vince Lombardi, talking about how to do it for the team. It was great.
I didn't have the accent down, I can guarantee you.
but you had the look, man. You had the little fedora.
I think we all love that competitiveness, that came with Coach Lombardi, but it was a joy serving with you as leader.
It was fun. No, not leader. We worked that thing together, and it worked well.
It did.
But we have a lot more serious things to talk about. There's been a big week in Congress, obviously, and the president's budget has arrived, as it's constitutionally required to do. There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of controversy about that. Obviously, you're vice chairman of the Joint Economic Committee, so what's your assessment of this budget?
Yeah, you're always hopeful when the president sends a budget down because you get a look into exactly where the White House is going. I just thought from the two priorities we share, I think, in our communities, creating jobs and getting these dangerous deficits under control, I didn't think the numbers added up. In all those numbers and all those pages, the two that stuck out to me were 2 and 4. By the end of the first term, the president will have doubled the entire size of this massive government at a time when a lot of businesses have shrunk and a lot of families' incomes have shrunk. And 4, meaning that he will have created deficits 4 times larger than the ones he inherited. So it seems to me the compass is sort of pointed the wrong direction because in our communities, getting these deficits under control is critical both for families to have confidence that they can buy, that their jobs are secure, that they're don't have a bunch of new taxes headed their way, and for businesses to start investing again, rehiring those workers. They need to know we're serious. So I didn't think that budget sent that signal to job creators. We're serious about the debt.
And it's been that way from the very beginning. The president likes to talk about the deficit he inherited. Frankly, he always forgets because he operates off the 2009 fiscal year, so it's the first 3 quarters of the year he sort of blames on President Bush. But if you really look at it, that's when we passed the stimulus. That's when he increased troop commitments in Afghanistan. That's when he passed S-CHIP. There's a lot of spending in there that he credits to his predecessor that really is his responsibility as president.
Yes, it really is.
So, yeah, it is a disappointing budget, and not for just what's in it, but for what's not in it. And, I think we all know one of the big challenges we face is entitlement. Again, you're a very senior member on the committee that deals with that, Ways and Means, that literally Medicare, Medicaid, some of these Social Security, you guys have a huge say. The president didn't have much to say about those things.
No, he really didn't, and I don't know if he's just ducking the tough issues with an upcoming campaign, but Social Security and Medicare are so important programs. My mom's on both, and like.
Well, I'm getting pretty close.
Well,
so I want you to take care of this.
Yeah, and so it's important. for so many of our seniors. But those programs are going bankrupt. And if we do nothing, if we just stand pat, it threatens really those programs for seniors. I think like you do, let's tackle these tough issues. Let's be truth tellers. Let's explain both to our seniors and to our next generation how deep the problem is and give them some solutions, some ideas on how to do that. I'm convinced that with Social Security there's some very good ideas on how to preserve it for every generation once and for all. Not for 5 years, not for 10 years, not for some, but for every generation once for all. And Medicare is going to be a tougher problem to solve because healthcare costs are going up so much. But we've got some other models too that can help us point the way. And maybe if we look at it as, keeping our current seniors and maybe those heading into the system, 55 or older, in what we have today because they're already comfortable with it. But for younger workers, sort of finding some new options for them that allow them, to have Medicare, but we can keep it within the budget. And there's, I think, some kind of good ideas on how to do that.
Can you give our listeners and our viewers some sort of idea of the dimensions of the problem we're talking about in Social Security and Medicare? I mean, how big a percentage of all our spending is it? And because I'm sure you run the same thing. You go to town hall meetings and visit with folks and say, if you guys could just cut that wasteful, stuff, the bridge to nowhere, this or that, we could get through this okay. But really, if you look at what a portion of the budget is, you just can't ignore these issues.
Well, as an appropriator, you know this because you work with it so closely, but in our community, when you're explaining that almost 2/3 of our budget is already dedicated to set aside Social Security, Medicare, and some Medicaid as well. And most people focus on, the spending in the other areas of it. But if you look out in the future, what you see is that Social Security and Medicare are growing so fast that in a number of years, they swallow the entire budget. There's literally not a dime left for our Army, our military, for education, for roads, period. And while it's growing, it's not growing more solvent. It's actually getting shakier. So that sort of drives the belief that we need, I think, to act sooner rather than later and really have a good discussion with the American people about what are those good ideas.
Well, and again, that's the disappointment, I think, where the president's concerned. I don't think anybody would expect that one party or one president by themselves can perfectly solve all the problems. But you got to begin the discussion. And to me, that's a preeminently presidential job to at least lead, to say, okay, we have this problem. Here's at least one way to tackle it. Let's sit down, let's talk, because obviously I think it wouldn't be fair to expect the president to do this on his own. But he's got to at least convene to talk and lay out sort of the initial proposal. Leadership's
so important. It's I describe it as home as clearing a field. Either party can clear out the small rocks. That's not a problem. The big boulders, you really need both parties putting their shoulders behind it. In this case, we haven't seen that leadership, and I worry, especially for our seniors, that again, if we don't start sitting down together and working these out, that each of those is going to get tougher. In fact, Social Security last year, for the first time, had to actually borrow money from overseas just to pay the seniors. The surplus is gone. This year we'll do it again, and that continues to grow each year. And so at some point, the worry is there isn't money to pay those benefits. So why delay? Why not lead? And I think the White House should have.
Yeah, it's the most staggering statistic to me that I'm sure you've read, that for the next 19 years, 10,000 Americans a day will hit Social Security age, 65, when they can begin to draw their benefits, maximum benefits. Yeah. So it's pretty impressive problem we've got here.
It is.
Let me ask you this, because you've not only focused on entitlements, you've been a budget hawk all the way through your career, and not just talk the talk, but have really put out important pieces of legislation. I'd like you to talk a little bit about your Sunset Act and how you see that working and what that would do to help us sort of right-size the government.
I'd love to, but I also want to return a compliment here. You're a member of one of the most important committees, if not Appropriations. And I know the time you spent hunting through this massive budget, looking for programs that are obsolete. They just were fine when they started. They don't serve a purpose today. That duplicate 10, 12, 15, 50 others, which we have programs that do that, and others that frankly don't succeed. We're spending money they don't. The Sunset Act basically uses a tool that 24 states currently use, where you set an expiration date on every federal program, agency, and bureaucracy, where they have to justify their existence to taxpayers or face elimination. And what you do is you say, look, you may have had value 100 years ago or 40 or even 10 years ago, but do you deserve tax dollars today? Are you earning what you're taking from taxpayers? You create a bipartisan commission to do it. And in fact, what happens is gridlock, if you don't act, gridlock actually works for the taxpayers. And what I've noticed in the states like Texas that have it is that when you hold agencies accountable, when you introduce customer service to them, and they survive if they serve customers well, they really get on their toes. They become much more responsive, not just to lawmakers, but to average citizens, which is what we want at the end of the day, a government that works for you and not against you. So I've introduced this bill since I came to Congress. I think the timing is absolutely right for it, because after we make some of these initial savings and reductions right now, we need something in place, sort of like a Jenny Craig or a Weight Watchers, to keep you know what I mean? Keep those pounds off. Yeah, sorry about that. Me too. Keep those pounds off and to keep reducing consistently. And that's what a Sunset Act and a Sunset Commission does, is continue to trim back those wasteful, obsolete, duplicative programs. So I'm excited. I'm hopeful the time is right. We've gotten great public support for it. So we're going to keep fighting.
The other thing, and you're absolutely right about the customer service end of it, but the other thing I've seen or believe that kind of program do is it makes every agency think very deeply about what it does, because it's going to have to go in front of people and explain in front of legislators, and how could I do this better? I mean, again, the set of conditions I was created under 5-10 years ago are almost certainly not the same. If they are, then whatever I've been doing probably hasn't been very effective. But you need to rethink your mission. How do you adapt? How do you change? What's different in the marketplace? What have you found out about people that you didn't know? And if you don't do that, I mean, they just sort of grind on forever with no change.
They know what President Reagan said, the greatest closest thing to immortality on this earth is a federal program, and that's true. And then we add more, we clone them on top of them. So I just think this is a great tool the public will support.
Well, but not your only tool. You've also proposed the Cuts Act, which is a $150 billion type of savings. So why don't you tell our listeners again a little bit about that and what would be involved?
It sounds like a lot, but it is. It would be a major reduction in the size of our government, but it's a small drop in the bucket compared to how deep our deficit is. But it's pretty common sense. We used and took the recommendations of the President's Deficit Reduction Committee that the White House, Republicans, and Democrats supported. We took the programs that both President Bush and President Obama targeted as no longer needed, put them together in a cut unsustainable and top-heavy spending act, $153 billion over 5 years. It's much larger over 10. And some of the ideas I think would be very popular. Freezing the salaries or in the budgets of the Congress and the White House. Stop giving unemployment to millionaires, which we do today. Sell off excess property the government doesn't use. Make federal workers pay their taxes. I mean, common sense says they ought to do that. They're on the government payroll. But some of them are, I think, start to get into more serious cuts, shrinking the federal workforce by 10%. We do it over attrition, by attrition over 10 years. So for every 3 positions that open, you just fill 2. So slowly you right-size the size of government. And we take a look at defense, not on our troops or their mission, because you and I are going to protect that till our dying day. But the Pentagon wastes too much money in what they buy. Their procurement and everything they purchase, frankly, has been I think a sore spot for years. The current secretary has basically acknowledged that. And so what it does is just says, look, get 15% more efficient in what you buy. In those big weapon systems, in those small, in the fuel you buy, and the service you do. And every military person, including my little brother, who's Command Sergeant Major at Fort Bliss, and a great man, have said, look, we can do better. And my thought is, in the defense, every wasted dollar is either a dollar lost to soldiers' care or heaped upon their kids as future debt. And neither is really acceptable. So as a very strong conservative as you are, I just want every agency, friend or foe, to spend our dollars more wisely.
You know, another area that you've been a real leader in is the trade issue. And this is one of the issues I think a lot of people misunderstand, how extraordinarily important trade is to the American economy. Most Oklahomans, frankly, don't know we export 80% of the wheat we grow beyond the continental United States. We've got both our states obviously are heavy in the exportation of energy equipment, energy technology, energy services all over the world. So these are really, really important things. You've been a real leader, so talk to us a little bit about the role you've played in some of the big agreements, and then frankly, how would you rate this administration to work with on trade issues?
Trade is economic development. It's just jobs, and recognizing the world has changed. 95% of the population lives outside the United States, and they buy 3/4 of everything bought in the world. So it's not enough just buy American. You have to sell American. We have to sell Oklahoma and Texas products and services all throughout the world. But when we try to, we find a lot of the world is tilted against us. Other countries have moved in ahead of us. Sometimes because we're such an open country, a lot of countries sell into the United States. But when we try to sell back, they sort of put up this America need not apply sign. So trade agreements tear down that sign and put us on a level playing field and create two-way trade. And when it does, we sell a lot. In fact, traditionally, we double what we sell. And agriculture is one of the leading parts of it. We're pushing to open new markets in Korea, Colombia, and Panama. Those represent $13 billion of new sales, a lot of it agriculture. I know in Oklahoma, I was reading some numbers of almost 18,000 agriculture jobs tied to that selling Oklahoma around the world. 1 out of 5 manufacturing jobs in Oklahoma come from getting out there and selling Oklahoma products as well. And so we're going to continue to push hard, this president, to help open those markets, because for the last 4 years, unfortunately under Democrat control, they just stopped all of it. And while we went to the sidelines, the game continued. And China and Europe and Canada and friend and foe went out there, and they reached agreements that gave their companies and workers and farmers advantages over us. So we're determined to get back on the field as Republicans. We're going to have a very aggressive agenda to open those markets for us. And I am pleased the President is making some progress on the South Korea agreement. But we cannot ignore Colombia and Panama and backyard, especially from an ag standpoint.
The Colombia one has just been the most mystifying to me. Here we have a country, frankly, that has turned itself around. It's now a good ally of the United States, has worked with us on drug interdiction. It's not your father's Colombia, so to speak, anymore. And not only that, they already have access to our market. This is literally a situation of them opening up their markets so we can sell them products and goods. There's almost no downside in terms of there's some domestic industry at risk, because again, they already have access to our markets. Why even the most bitter opponents of free trade would recognize this is about just letting us sell to them.
Two-way trade, and the problem is that by benching ourselves as a country, we're falling behind. In fact, Colombia's a great example. While we've delayed for 4 years, now nearly 5 with Colombia approving that agreement, other countries move ahead. We've lost almost half of our wheat market in Colombia, soybean as well. And the longer we delay, it's our U.S., American, Oklahoma, Texas farmers and ranchers who get hurt. So in a time when 14 million Americans are out of work and our companies are looking for customers, I say, why would we ignore a friend in our backyard who wants to? I mean, who's offering to buy what we sell? Why would we put that on?
And again, I think most people won't remember this, you will, because of how hard you worked on it, but these are 3 agreements that were largely negotiated, were ready to go in the last year of the Bush administration, and literally Democrat Congress wouldn't accept them, wouldn't allow them to be debated and have a vote on them. So they've sat there, and that's, by the way, rather insulting to our friends who've bargained with us in good faith. Creates political problems for them at home, and in some cases they'd already. I remember in Colombia, frankly, there were literally riots by Colombian farmers who were afraid of American competition. They went ahead and negotiate the deal, and then we don't come through on our side.
It really, I think it is not just embarrassing. I wish it were just embarrassing. I think it's a major foreign relations blunder. It undercuts our leadership and credibility. And from a job standpoint, makes it harder for us to open that next country. You know what I mean? So that we can sell more to them. And again, at the end of the day, it's all about jobs. And it's all about getting our financial house in order. More sales, more jobs, more revenue, the better we are.
You're one of the really, frankly, smart people in the Congress. You served in the majority, you served in the minority. Obviously, we're back in the majority again. Very new and different kind of majority for us. And off to a start. We're, just so our listeners know, they'll hear this a little bit later, but we're in an effort to pass what's called a continuing resolution, which is literally to cut some of the spending this year out of an existing ongoing budget. We'll be moving forward to deal with the debt ceiling and to fund the government the rest of the way through. But the debt ceiling, we'll have the Republican budget. We have the Republican appropriations process beginning now, which will lead to the budget for next year. How are we doing? I mean, how do you think this Congress is shaping up and moving along toward the really difficult task it has?
It's early, but I love the direction we're going. I love on day one that we opened up this House. We said we're going to post those bills for 3 days for all America to read. That you're going to have to actually think about, is this law allowed by the Constitution? One bill, one topic, so that, the public can, and I love those changes. I love what we're doing this week on trying to trim the size of the government for the rest of the year. It's so open. Every member of the House has the opportunity to offer their idea and convince the will of the House, Republican, Democrat, to support them. That hasn't been done for years.
Even our Democratic colleagues will tell you that. And they really, I've had several of them say, obviously we disagree philosophically on but I have to compliment you guys. We didn't do this for 4 years. It was a big mistake. Right now in this continuing resolution that we're working on, there have been well over 500 amendments submitted by both sides. I mean, there's over 280 Democratic amendments. Nothing's been, not allowed unless it just doesn't. We're trying to legislate on an appropriation bill, but it's pretty amazing to watch, and it really helps. Speaker Boehner likes to say that Congress works best when Congress is allowed to work its will. I mean, and it's exciting on the floor in a way it hasn't been, even when we ran it before. I mean, I think this is fundamentally different from what we did.
This is not the Democrats. This is not the old Republicans. This is a new Republican majority. I love the fact that our title of representative just became more real because we have a chance to represent Texas and Oklahoma, our concerns, our constituents' desires and ideas, and actually have a chance to move them forward. And at the end of the day, the American public wants us to listen. They want us to fight for them, and they want us fully engaged. Just give us a chance to be heard, and we're seeing that. It's going to be messy, as you know, and you've commented on this. It is going to be messy, but it is a good, in the People's House, all order and all discipline and no surprises. Probably not the way this country was supposed to be.
And I've been pleased and surprised on the floor how often there are bipartisan coalitions on particular amendments or issues, so that it's not always R versus D. And I think members feel a lot more free to sort of be, I don't agree with the majority of my colleagues on this issue. I actually think the Democratic or the Republican proposal makes more sense, and you can see that every day. There's actually been more bipartisanship on the votes than I've ever seen in the House in the time that I've been here.
Me too, and I sometimes look at those partnerships and stare. It just some of them don't fit, but the ideas fit together. That's what matters. The principles and ideas matter, and I know as for the appropriations leaders like yourself, this raises more challenges overall, but Do you think it's a healthy?
I think the Appropriations Committee has loved this process, and we've been, I think, and for the most despised committee for a lot of reasons. The spending's out of control, and we've had practices under both parties that frankly weren't transparent and weren't what they should be. But I think appropriators are pretty proud of the work they're doing, that they did what the Republican conference asked them to do, cut $100 billion, not just across the board, but go in there and say, this program's no good, it's out of here, this program's no good, it's out of here, cut this one in half, maybe add a little bit here. I mean, it's been a pretty thoughtful exercise, and then I think the debate on the floor has enhanced the value of the product because, frankly, the Appropriation Committee's 50 people. They have certain expertise, and they're good, but there's a lot of smart people in Congress on both sides of the aisle, and there's always somebody that knows more about whatever you know about than you do. Just letting them come into debate has been wonderful.
I also think, too, that this deficit we've been digging into it, all of us have, and it's actually, I think, more deep and more dangerous than we thought. And I've sort of rethought our conservative strategy is that this elephant is too big to eat at one bite. Really, we're going to have to continue to gnaw away and chew away at waste and abuse and duplication, all of this, on a daily basis. So it's just not this bill. One bill won't do it. It's not going to be just the bill to keep the government open. It's not going to be the budget for 5 years. It's not going to be just the debt ceiling vote. It's literally got to be a daily commitment to reducing the size of government. And I don't think the public yet has grasped we have a new strategy that is going to be both thoughtful and relentless.
Every single week we've had an opportunity to vote on something that reduces the size of government. Every week.
And thanks for your leadership on eliminating the Presidential Commission. $500 million for an idea that came and went, that we can save. What great leadership.
Well, you're nice to say that, but I just, who's going to miss it? 5 or 6 guys running for president. They don't really need $500 million from the American taxpayer when we're running a deficit. But that's been a great program. Let me ask you this. We don't have a lot of time left, but again, you've seen a lot of classes come and go. This is a pretty remarkable group. We've got a new freshman in James Langford, who I'm extraordinarily proud of and pleased with. I know you've got some new freshmen out of the great state of Texas. So tell what do you think about this new group that's showing up here with all this passion, intensity, and energy?
I love these guys. It really is. It's a big group, 87 record size. And as leadership of House Republicans, you fought to increase that majority, but I feel like it's the cavalry coming to the rescue. So many of them have a small business experience. They've met payroll. They're involved in their church, in the Chamber of Commerce, and Rotary. I like their attitude, and they're willing to fight for it. So I think they're just a great addition.
They really are, and they just, the energy, the passion. I think it's actually made those of us that were here better, sort of reconnected us with some of the values and some of the ideas we had when we were running the first time.
Absolutely.
Well, we're just about out of time, but I think for our listeners, you understand why I respect and like Kevin Brady so much. And you can see the competence, why he's tasked with so many tough and difficult challenges here in the Congress. So, Kevin, I look forward to a long relationship, and just thanks for what you do for not just for our team, not just for Texas, but more profoundly for the country.
Thank you, sir. Now, if you could just take it easy on our football and basketball teams.
Sorry, no mercy. No quarter. No quarter. What's you would know this better. Is it DeQuelo or whatever the expression is? But we do want you to keep sending those great Texas football players up to see us. I told President Bush one time, this is another year we're going to see whether our Texas players are better than your Texas players. So
thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Appreciate it.
You bet.